Okay, and welcome everybody to the special council meeting of July 6th. We're gathered here at 5:15 p.m. on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, and that the connections to this land continues to this day. I also want to just note that these proceedings are video streamed, live streamed. This is the second agenda in which we've been able to reopen to the public in a limited capacity. So we have a few people, I believe, in the antechamber that will come in, and we have applicants coming in on land use items. So we keep adopting our procedures as we go forward, and this is another net new day in the scheme of council. We just want to start. I don't have much in the way of mayor's remarks. We had a meeting last week. I do want to point out that the draft 2019 annual report is up on the website and open for public input. We are soliciting, written comments, ideas, suggestions, etc. You can send those to the email address that you see on the website at obcouncil@oakbay.ca for input. And so please do that. That will be coming back for consideration by council on July the 20th. That's the end of my remarks. We have a public participation period here, and I believe we have 3 people, or at least one person I know is coming for public participation. And so we'll just take a moment here and invite them. But of course, you can also call in to this. And so if you're at home watching this, there is a slight delay when you call in. Actually, quite a significant delay between our web stream and here. So if you call now at 250-598-3311, you will go into the queue, and someone should answer the phone and put you and manage the queue there for you. If it's busy, just wait a minute and call back again. But again, that number is 250-598-3311, and we'll be taking those calls directly here. So thank you for if you wish to call in. We'll hear you in a minute. In the meantime, we have our first in-person person coming into our public participation. I just would ask that you state your name, municipality of residence, and the general topic of your remarks. Again, we have our standard 3 minutes of comments, and just ask that you direct comments through the chair, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Bob Wallace. I live at 1584.
I'm not sure if is the microphone turned on there? No, now it is. Thank you very much. It is. Okay. Thank you.
May I take this off? You have yours off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Bob Wallace from 1584 Prospect Place in the middle of the HCA. Anyways, I would like to start with this. If I can get it going, of course. Okay, we'll try it a different way. Eric. Hello? Hello?
For those on the phone, we're listening to a recording that Mr. Wallace is playing for us through the microphone.
Okay, if Eric trying to call in, I'll call back, I guess, eh?
Can you just stop it for a moment, sir? Or he moved it a couple inches away. That helped a lot.
Eric.
Yes, Eric, sorry. We had, without explanation, it was just put on there. So Mr. Wallace was playing a recording from his phone.
It's the same as we get, your Mayor, Mr. Mayor, so I'll just continue.
Announcing participants.
Eric. Hello?
Can you pause for a second? I just need to explain what's going on, if you don't mind, Mr. Wallace. Sorry to the members of council who are on the phone. Mr. Wallace is playing a recording from his of the noise in his neighborhood, and that's what that noise is. So that is what's being played at the moment. Just for explanation, I can understand why you would think there was something wrong with the phone. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you.
Wallace. You have a minute left. You have about 10 seconds left, Mr. Wallace, of the
Well,
3 minutes.
I disapprove because you've asked me to stop it a couple of times, so I disapprove.
I try to stop my timer, but I'll give you an extra 30 seconds or so. Go ahead.
Okay. Disruption to an established neighborhood day in and day out, or not one, not two, but 9 approved months for blasting permits, which is conservatively works out to 765 hours. Jill Pollard has informed council of the letters we received from various people. The neighborhood cannot enjoy their homes, gardens, family, or friends visiting or work constructively from home between starting times today at 7:15 and when they finish for the day. The noise drives us from our homes since we are hearing or waiting to have it restart, resulting in almost post-traumatic stress disorder by some of the people in the area. The destruction of the landscape is devastating. Who is responsible for allowing this, and was it all in the original approval? Some form of compensation seems reasonable at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace, and for sharing. Can you just very briefly, in 10 seconds or less, explain what the noise was? Was that the drilling sound?
Part of it, Your Honor, part of it was the drilling, and is other parts of it, the compressor, and I'd like to read something else to you, if I may.
That's time. If you can send it to us by
No.
email, though, and we'll have a chance to look at it.
Again, the holder of, in your bylaw 4247 in number 6, the holder of a blasting permit may only carry on blasting operations, use an explosive agent or operating drill, compressors, which it was, or other equipment used in preparing land for blasting, Monday to Friday exclusive of statutory holidays between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. I finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. I will just let you know and others know.
Disappointed in the council.
I'll just let you know and the council know. There is some review happening of the, there is some review happening of our noise bylaws, reviewing them compared to other jurisdictions. So that process is going on.
Within this term.
We can't give you a timeline yet, so that's, yes, we cannot give you an exact timeline yet, but it is being reviewed.
It should be soon.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the waiting room that wishes to come speak to council?
They're here for a specific application, Your Worship.
Okay, so is there anyone who have called in? I'm going to actually make another call again, just one last time, to 250-598-3311. Can you just, Ms. Deal, can you just turn off the microphone before you wipe it? There we go, thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to call in? This is the last call I'll make for the public participation period. That's 250-598-3311. 598-3311. I'll give about 40 seconds here, 45 seconds for people to call in. So we will wait in the interim. Again, that number 250-598-3311. Ms. Hopkins, has there been anybody else call into the line at this point?
Your Worship, there are no callers.
Okay, in that case, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the ADP 00117-3145 Ripon Road. I'm just going to, we have a sort of a modified process here to ensure that we get all the pieces in order here. So If anybody is interested in commenting on 3145 Ripon Road application, this would be a good time to call into the phone number, which is 250-598-3311. We will take that in the queue. We won't get to your call for a little bit because we have to go through our process, but that will be the first item up. If people want to start calling in now, if they have any interest, that would be the time.
Chair, this is Councillor Zelko with a point of procedure.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much. Apologize for being late. I couldn't find the call-in number. I just wanted to make sure you knew that I was on the line.
Yes, we have all members of council present. For those watching at home, we have Councillor Zelka and Councillor Appleton who are not able to make it into the hall today, so they are calling in remotely through a conference call. We've just invited the applicant in for this item, so welcome. And I'm just going to invite Ms. Jensen, our Manager of Planning, to do an introduction of this item.
Thank you, Your Worship. This particular property at 3145 Ripon Road is located along the east side of the road where the applicant is proposing to construct an approximately 800 square foot accessory building behind the existing single-family home. The design itself utilizes natural vertical cedar siding in a reverse board and batten design, exposed roof beams, and a standing seam metal roof, and is in keeping with the design and scale of the home. Staff have reviewed the application and note the proposed work meets all requirements of the RS2 zone and substantially meets the Uplands design guidelines. It has been sensitively sited to mitigate impacts to trees and to respect the park-like setting of the area. The site is currently at 70% tree canopy cover and no trees are being removed. Conditions will be put in place to protect existing trees during construction. Staff are requesting council direction as to the options outlined in the report.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. And I would just like to point out for those who are watching at home and for members of council as well, just a reminder, items like this in the Uplands would normally be referred and go through a process of going through an advisory design panel prior to coming to this table. Because we are not having our committees meeting at this time, staff are bringing these applications directly to council, and we have the ability here to make a determination of what next steps are appropriate for it. We can consider the application on its merits, or we could decide some other course of action, such as waiting or referring it or calling a special meeting or what have you. So this is sort of the framework by which we're having this discussion. Again, I'm just going to remind any of the members of the public who wish to speak to this item to call in 598-3311. But for now, it's council's turn. So if council has any questions of staff or the applicant, this is the opportunity to do so. I'm going to go to the councillors in the room first, and then I'll call on Councillor Appleton and Zelka. Is there any members of council? Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you so much, Mayor, and through you. I just have a question in regards to the arborist report, and it's just a sentence that the arborist has in the report that says, any opportunity to raise the finished grade may reduce the depth of excavation, and it's talking about one of the Gary oak trees or a couple of the Gary oak trees, and so I'm wondering if that has been taken into consideration.
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you. Through your worship. Those types of construction details would be dealt with at the building permit stage, so we would be looking for that content at that time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant or staff? I'm not seeing any, so we'll go Councillor Appleton or Zelka. Do you have any questions of the applicant or staff at this time?
Councillor Zelka has one.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. A question through you to staff. I'll certainly start with staff at least initially. I do note on the building drawings with respect to what's sitting, I guess, in front of the accessory building is something referred to on the building plans as a generator. A generator is something that makes sound. So I wanted to ask about the generator and sound attenuation and sound decibels and anything that we need to worry about or need to be considered with respect to sound and the generator.
Sure, I'll happy to give that over to staff or the applicant. I'm not sure who's best able to answer the question. Ms. Jensen?
Through your worship, that generator is actually part of the existing home, so it would be subject to the noise bylaw and the requirements of the zoning bylaw as well.
Is it new, sorry, to the...
So it would not be new. It's not part of this application.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer the question, Councillor Zelka?
That question, yes. I do have another. Thank you.
Go ahead.
One more question, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. With respect to the metal roof that's been described as for the building finish, is there any concern with respect to sound off the metal roof in terms of trying to maintain a park-like setting for the neighbors? Again, I love the design. I think it's quite reasonable. I like how it's sensitive to the house. I think, by the way, the report is also very excellent. Thank you very much, staff. But I did want to ask in particular about the sound of a metal roof in a park-like setting.
Sure, and I'll happy to hand that over to anybody who wishes to answer, but it might be best for the applicant to just the reason for the selection of the roof and consideration of noise in that design. And if you just introduce yourself and your company as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. My name is Greg Demant. I'm a principal with Cascadia Architects. And through you, in answer to the question, the metal roof was selected for durability and maintenance reasons. I don't anticipate it having any effect sound-wise for the neighbors based on the orientation. It's not going to reflect sound waves, towards anybody in that respect. If there was to be any issue with regard to sound, it would be actually internal to the shed itself, right? And that would be with rain or something like that. But no, it's not going to make any more noise than a regular roof would in terms of the neighbors.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Demont. Any other questions, Councillor Zelka?
No, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to then ask Councillor Appleton. I'll go to Councillor Green. Any questions, Councillor Appleton?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Demont. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the report and the design. Just wondering if neighbors were consulted, or was there any solicitation of opinions, or just out of courtesy, are they aware of this, and what was the feedback like? Thank you.
I'm going to go to staff because really the notification process. If first, did we provide any notification process as part of the ADP? Or the design, sorry, the
Thank you, Your
upload
Worship.
setting and design process?
Yeah, there's no specific notification or mail out or anything like that related to an ADP application. We do post a sign on the front of the property, and we've had no inquiries.
And Mr. Demont, were there any additional requests for input from neighbors?
Through you, Chair, we at Cascadia Architects did not talk to the neighbors. I'm not sure if the homeowner had spoken with the neighbors, outside of that, but we haven't seen we haven't spoken to or heard from, had any questions from any neighbors. No.
Thank you very much, and I'm assuming then that no news is good news. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this time? Not seeing any. So
may I ask one more question, Chair?
You may.
Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. One more question related to the generator, and this may be a question more for the Director of Engineering than Building and Planning, although Building and Planning may want to chime in. I do understand that historically there have been power outages with respect to BC Hydro service in the Uplands area, and I do note that a number of houses throughout the Uplands have installed generators as a way of mitigating some of the concerns. And I've heard from one of the neighbors to this house that in the last year the power was out approximately 6 months ago for about 6 hours. I was wondering if there's any reports or any information that could be provided as to what BC Hydro may or may not be doing with respect to service in this area, with respect to, for example, the need for generators or the potential recommended need for generators.
I'm going to just leave that aside for now because it's not directly related to this application, but I'm very happy, if you wish me to, Councillor Zelka, I'm happy to write to the our liaison at BC Hydro and can solicit that information, or we can do that through staff as well.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the public at this point. Have Ms. Hopkins, are there any members of the public who have called in on this item?
Your Worship, no calls have been received.
Okay, thank you. So we're back at this table then. If there's no more questions, I would take a motion before we get into any kind of debate.
I'll move that the proposal to construct an accessory building at 3145 Ripon Road as outlined in the July 6, 2020 report for ADP 00117 be approved as to upland siting and design.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
If I may ask one last question.
Absolutely, Councillor Zelka, go ahead.
I really appreciate this. I couldn't find it mentioned in the report. It may be there, and I do apologize. I want to ask about the dark skies principles, whether they were utilized on the lighting in the backyard of this accessory building.
I'm just looking at who wishes to answer the question. Mr. Dumont, do you know what the exterior lighting is on this building?
Through you, Chair, I can confirm that there's no uplighting proposed in the design. So in other words, we don't have light spillage beyond the property lines or into the tree canopy or anything like that.
Is that sufficient, Councillor Zelka?
Well, I just hear an echo from the absent advisory planning advisory, the APC, because I do notice that for many of the uplands properties, they almost always ask about dark skies. So I just wanted to make sure we asked about that, and I'm hearing that that it has been considered and it's not a concern. Is that correct?
Well, I'll go to the staff at this point just to make sure that their read of that is the same. Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, when we are reviewing an application, we do take into consideration dark sky principles as part of the application review, and over to Mr. Dumont's comments.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Is that satisfactory, Councillor Zelka?
It is. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the table. Is there any other discussion on this motion? I'm not seeing any. I will then call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Zelka?
In favor?
Councillor Appleton? Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. That passes unanimously, so thank you very much, Mr. Dumont, and welcome back. It's been a long time since we've seen you in these chambers, or seen anybody for that matter.
That's
You're
right.
you're the
No,
first one.
It's a pleasure, and thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Up next on the agenda, we have another advisory design for upland siting and design for 3165 Midland Road. This is a new build, and again, I was just going to make a preemptive ask. If anybody watching at home is interested and wishes to make comment or question for 3165 Midland Road, this is the opportunity to call in to 250-598-3311, 598-3311, and we will put you in the queue. But at this time, we're going to invite the applicant to come in. I believe the applicant is here. We have all staff doing triple duty tonight for those watching at home, so we're we're just waiting for the applicant to come into the chambers. Given the lack of space we have in our chambers, in case you're wondering, the applicants are waiting outside in the parking lot as we call them in. So we have a little interesting queuing mechanism right now. It's a good thing we have good weather here tonight. So welcome, sir. And we are just going to go through a little bit of a modified from usual process. So just bear with us a little bit as we go through. We do have two of the councillors are on calling in on video call, so we'll be accommodating that as well. And again, if the public are watching and they want to make any comments on 3165 Midland Road, it's a good time now at 598-3311 to call in, and we'll put you in the queue. But for now, Ms. Jensen, our Manager of Planning, if you want to give a quick overview of the application.
Thank you, Your Worship. This property at 3165 Midland Road is a vacant lot located along the east side of Midland Road, north of Lansdowne. The applicant is proposing to build a single-family home and accessory building. The proposed home would incorporate a French country design with high-quality materials, including troweled stucco cladding and slate-inspired roofing. The home would be built to level 3 of the BC Energy Step Code. The property is heavily treed, with 4 trees proposed for removal to accommodate construction of the home only. This still provides for 49% tree canopy cover, which exceeds the 45% set out in the tree protection bylaw. 8 replacement trees would also be required to be planted. We anticipate that some of these trees can be accommodated on site, and others will be planted in the municipal boulevard with the siting approved by the Parks Department. We anticipate a minimum of 7 Gary oak trees will be planted or maintained directly in front of the home. The application was received in the latter half of March, subsequent to the last meeting that was held for the advisory design panel. As such, it has not been reviewed by the panel, but staff have undertaken a professional review of the proposed construction to ensure substantial compliance with both the Uplands guidelines and the Uplands policies contained within the official community plan. Proposed works also meet all requirements of the RS2 zone. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, council did receive a report from planning staff in April advising that during the COVID-19 pandemic, with no meetings of the advisory bodies, staff would bring forward minor applications to council. For the Uplands specifically, council did ask that all applications come forward to council for their consideration. 3 options have been outlined in the report where council can consider approving or denying the application or referring the application to a future meeting of the advisory design panel for their recommendation. And staff are requesting council direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. And at this point, I'm just going to reiterate, if people are watching at home and want to call in because they can't come here, just call into the 250-598-3311 number, and I'll make that call again before we get to the public portion of this. But at this point, it's to council. If there's any questions of the applicant or of staff, this is the time to ask them. Councillor Green, then Councillor Braithwaite, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to the applicant. One of the paragraphs that jumped out at me in the arborist report was the second to the last paragraph that says canopy cover. My calculations show that the trees being shown as retained on the plan will provide approximately 49% canopy cover. The requirement for the property is 45%. So if at all the trees are retained as planned, they should reach the canopy target. So I guess it's the word if that concerns me a little bit. I'm hoping that every effort will be made to meet that 45% or greater. Thank you. And just wondered if you could comment. Thank you.
I think that probably would go to the applicant. If you could just state your name and company for the record, please.
Sure. I'm excuse me, Mark Whitney with Novus Properties. I'm not sure why he used the word if. There's no trees that I would be concerned about. Anything that's very near the home is being removed, and everything else should be no problem to protect if we follow his protocols.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitney.
I have Councillor Braithwaite, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think that this might be directed at staff, perhaps. I'm just wondering that because this is a brand new build on an empty lot, what would be, would it be within our due diligence to perhaps reconvene the ADP to run it by them first? And I'm just wondering if staff might have any comments on that.
Certainly, I can put it over to staff. It's ultimately up to us to determine what that next step is. But Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. That is certainly within the purview of council. Staff have done their best with a professional review to ensure that this is in compliance with the guidelines that are set out both for the uplands specifically and within the OCP policy. And our planner has worked quite diligently with the applicants to ensure that those are substantially being met.
Okay, thank you. And then I did have one other question in regards to the accessory building. And I noticed that there's a full bathroom and a full walk-in closet, it looks like, in the accessory building. And I'm wondering what perhaps that accessory building is going to be used for.
Mr. Whitney?
It's just a workshop, and so the closet is just a storage closet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Patterson? And I'll go to Councillor Zelka and Appleton if they have any questions after I've gone through the councillors in chambers. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, I think this may also be for staff. It is. I also am wondering about this being reviewed by the ADP. This stretch of Midland is quite rural in its appearance. It differs greatly from the image that is presented for the proposed build that is here. It's a much more naturalized rural setting, and while certainly the appearance of the proposed build as presented with the sidewalks and road adjoining conveys a certain feel to it that may be apparent in the rest of Uplands. It's very different on this specific stretch of Midland. So certainly what is proposed in the drawings here, while it's a lovely build, it's very different from the rest of the neighborhood, and so it's very difficult to understand how it will fit in the context of those homes. And I'm wondering what how staff have looked at it in the context of those homes. And, I don't know, perhaps there are plans to change that road out, to add sidewalks, but definitely the image that is on here portrays it differently from the lot. So perhaps if staff could give us some information on how they have reviewed it, perhaps since the design panel is not meeting. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'll put it to both, actually. I'll leave it to staff just to explain a little bit about that assessment process and what the context has looked like. I know that there's sometimes competing because there's need to do different designs within the area, as well as the need to maintain a certain appropriateness, but I'll also give it to Mr. Whitney as well to explain a little bit about the context and the reason for the design. Go ahead, Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are currently no plans to change the makeup of that portion of Midland Road. The Uplands bylaw itself has one clause in it that refers to no building should look the same within the area within 500 feet of each other. So staff review that in context to make sure that the buildings all have different character attached to them within a given area. Within the guidelines themselves, it does not set out any specific themes for individual areas. So it really is the applicant coming in with a proposal and then council determining whether that proposal meets the guidelines that are set out for the Uplands area. To Councillor Patterson's point, the graphic that is shown for the proposed home is a little misleading in that it is showing just the front of the building, but you actually are looking at a very wide boulevard that's in front of this home with a substantial amount of trees that will be planted in front of it. So that park-like setting, I believe, will still be retained for that area.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Mr. Whitney as well, just to provide some context as well for that design.
Sure. I think Ms. Jensen covered most of the points that I would mention. The only other thing is the perspective of the rendering may make the driveway and pathway look larger than they are. There's currently a circular asphalt driveway that's existing that will be removed, and the new driveway will actually be a bit smaller, and we've added grass. We've worked with engineering to add grass strips or grasscrete in between the paving to reduce the paving. So I think part of the perspective is that it appears larger than it really is, the paved area. Because we definitely had that park-like setting and the more rural feel in mind when we were designing. I'd also just mention that we did go and meet with many of the neighbors there, and all were quite favorable with it.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. You still have anything else further? Okay, Councillor Green again, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And it's just a comment actually on the process. As ADP Council Liaison, I appreciate the comments from Councillors Patterson and Braithwaite. We do value the ADP committee, and because many of them are architects, as you know, and it's always important to have that perspective. But under the circumstances, it's unfortunate that we can't really involve them in the way we'd like to. Although we did, I remember making a change in the wording on the committees and commissions that if required, we could pull, for instance, the ADP together because it was a land use committee. So really, I guess it is up to us. But I'm also mindful of the fact that the application, I believe Ms. Jensen mentioned through you, Mayor, that it's been sitting since March without any overview until now. So I wonder through you, Mayor, if I could ask the applicant, Mr. Whitney, are there timeline issues or deadline issues that you're faced with at this point or not? Thank you.
Mr. Whitney?
There is. This was something we were hoping to have slated for August. At this point, we've missed that, but both ourselves and the homeowner would like to start as soon as possible.
I think, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Patterson. I'm going to go to Zelka and Appleton.
Just as a follow-up to that, I noticed on the report that it said the original house was demolished in 2017. I'm just wondering what guidelines we have set for demolishing of a house and the duration of time between the demolition and construction of a new build, because it does seem that the lot, I know this is rather out of the way lot, but that is a long time for a lot to be vacant and uncared for.
I'll go to staff. Are there any requirements within our bylaws for timelines? That's right. I should say Ms. Jensen, just so people at home know who's talking.
There are some guidelines in some various bylaws and guidelines that we have. This was an interesting situation where this property was actually in front of council in 2017 to construct a new home. That was approved at the time. The homeowner moved forward then with those plans, pardon me, and undertook to demolish the home at that time, but then since sold the property. So that's why we're now sitting with a vacant lot.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Appleton or Zelka. Is there any questions from either of the councillors on the phone?
From Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to staff and also to the proponent for bringing forward this item on the agenda. I did want to ask, with respect to the process, since we're sort of bypassing the advisory design panel and also the ADP, it would be helpful for me if the advisory design panel assessment checklist was included in the staff report, even if the advisory design panel is not meeting, in terms of making sure that all of the items have been considered with respect to the uplands. So, for example, I'll have to ask again about dark skies amongst one of the many, many items that are mentioned in the checklist for that we usually see as part of the advisory design panel assessment minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka, and perhaps staff can talk to how staff use that, what the advisory planning or design panel, I should say, uses for their checklist. Ms. Jensen, or?
I believe the checklist that Councillor Zelka is referring to is the one that you would see the summary of in the minutes from the advisory design panel, which goes through a series of items. Okay. Similarly, staff have not been using that same checklist, but we go through every single guideline that's set out for the uplands area as well as OCP policy to determine how an application is meeting the requirements, including, as Councillor Zelka mentioned, the dark sky principles.
All right.
If I may, Chair?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much. So I very much appreciate and do note in the staff report in a conversational way, many of the items on this checklist appear to be talked to, but others I can't tell completely. If while I do note it's a lovely design and appears to present very well from the street, it also appears to have a lot of lights, and many of these lights appear to be throwing light in all directions. So if staff could share how this property with the current lighting as from what I can tell meets the dark skies principles, I'd appreciate knowing that, please.
I might give that actually to Mr. Whitney, just as the proponent. He can answer that if he can, and if not, or I might just give staff a chance to clarify if there's anything that needs to be added. Mr. Whitney, can you just speak to the lighting of the house in terms of how its light propagation is designed?
Sure, yes. None of the lights are uplights. They all have canopies. They also utilize obscured glass, which helps bring the light down, and a softer bulb as opposed to white lighting. And then in the landscape, there's no uplighting planned.
Does that answer your question satisfactorily, Councillor Zelka?
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from Councillor Zelka or Councillor Appleton?
Councillor Appleton, just one quick question.
Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, I just wanted to clarify a point about just between sort of harmonizing what's said in the staff report and the arborist report. The staff report mentions that 4 trees are to be removed, and that the district arborist had noted that they weren't necessarily ideal trees for attention in any case. I don't see mention of that specifically in the arborist's report. And then I just note that on the plans and drawings, there's an area designated that trees will be removed. But I guess I'm just used to seeing a site plan that specifically delineates where existing trees that are to be removed, like the individual stems of trees. I see the trees to be removed and trees to be planted are on the landscape plan individually numbered, but there's just sort of a general area of trees to be removed. So can I just confirm that the existing trees are all within those white circles that are designated as existing trees to be removed? I don't have any indication, say, of trunk size or any of those other kinds of things. So is there any more information available on that?
Mr. Buffett, our planner, will answer your question.
For the first part of the question, thank you, Your Worship. For the first part of the question, staff, upon receiving the memo from our district arborist, did follow up with the district arborist to ask specifically, for the 4 trees that are being removed, what's the sort of status of those? And he did reply saying that those trees were not ideal specimens, all 4 of them. So that was specified by the arborist, although it didn't make it into the memo. He did provide that to us via email. For the other question, yes, I believe so. Those 4 trees that would be removed are all in the footprint or immediately adjacent to the footprint. They're all very close to the building itself, and those 4 trees would be the only trees that would be removed as part of this. We do also have an arborist report from Talbot McKenzie that staff reviews and looks at, and that does outline these tree removals a little bit more clearly, but yes, it's those 4 trees are the trees.
Thank you, Mr. Buffett. Any other questions, Councillor Appleton?
Just one quick follow-up. Thank you, Your Worship. Further to Mr. Buffett's comments, and I appreciate that, I just want to confirm that issuance of the ADP, he mentioned review of the applicant's arborist report as part of the review. I'm going to assume that issuance of the ADP or recommendation of issuance of the ADP is contingent on staff having approved the contents of the applicant's arborist report. Is that correct?
I'm going to give that to staff in terms of what the process is for what goes to the advisory design panel in terms of a package. Ms. Jensen? Sorry, I should say your name first so you know who to answer.
We're just thinking about the best way to answer that. So the general process is that we receive a complete application. Most of the information is forwarded over to the advisory design panel, including the tree report. The bulk of the review of the trees, though, is run through our Parks Department and our arborists to ensure that they are meeting all requirements of the tree bylaw, to confirm the condition of the trees, and whether our Parks Department is in support.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Is that Councillor Appleton? Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just throw in one other follow-up, and this is to the applicant, Mr. Whitney. Can you just give a little sense of what efforts were made to kind of site the house in a way that was, maximize the retention of trees on the land and minimize damage to existing trees there?
Sure. The property poses a few challenges with the slopes and the number of oak trees. And so working with our arborist, we sited the house and changed the floor plan and the garage location to save the healthiest trees and remove, as the municipal arborist states, the not as healthy trees.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to make a call again to anybody who's watching at home and wishes to call in and ask questions or make comment on 3165 Midland. It's probably the last time I'll call, or second to last time, 250-598-3311. Making this call because we can't have people from the public coming into the chambers here. So With that, I'll come back to council. Are there any other questions of the applicant or of staff at this point? I'm not seeing any. Okay, so
Question from Councillor Zelka.
go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. And I'm not sure whether this would be to the staff or to the applicant, but I would love to know a bit more about the basement of the building and with respect to blasting. What is going to be expected with respect to noise and blasting and duration of blasting, if there is going to be any? That would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'll go to the applicant, Mr. Whitney. Do you have a sense of what the what's going to be required on the site?
There is no basement and just a crawl space, and we don't anticipate any rock, so I would expect no blasting.
Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions? Councillor Green?
I'm prepared to make a motion if.
Always in order.
So I will move the staff recommendation that this application be approved. Thank you.
I just want to make, it's moved and seconded. I just want to make sure that there's no staff recommendation here necessarily. They've given it to us from a process perspective. I think that's, I'm not sure, I double check that, but I recall from the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're right, it is. You're right.
I was reading from the first paragraph there.
No, you're right.
Thank you.
I apologize. I just wanted to make sure I didn't, yes, thank you. Process was up to us, not the, it's all up to us, but that's the recommendation. Okay, thank you. So it's moved and seconded. At this point, further questions, comments are all welcome. I'm looking around the table.
One last question from Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question more related to process. Assuming we do approve this, is this where notice will go out to the folks within 50 meters, or is this, has notice already been happened? What's the next step if we do go forward with, I guess, what we call approval?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I will answer this, but I'll get my hand slapped if I get it wrong. The approval process here is us. Because it's siting and design, this is the delegated authority given to us by the province under the Special Powers Act to approve siting and design. That sits with council. Normally it would have gone through the ADP and then to us, but we are just at this point making the final call.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you. Is the next step after this then building permit and then possible, if there were variances, that might come back to council? Or is this the last time we'll see it?
This is the last time council would see it. There are no variances being asked for.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. It's everything feels so different in this format. So it's just nice to have this those questions asked aloud sometimes just to make sure that we're all clear in terms of what we're talking about. I'm not seeing a lot of other comments, questions. Councillor Appleton, I want to make sure I don't leave you behind if there's a.
No, fine. Go ahead. Thanks.
Okay. Is there any, Ms. Hopkins, is there any call-ins on this item?
Your Worship, there's been no calls received.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other discussion, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
And none opposed, since everybody put up their hand. Thank you, Mr. Whitney, and good luck with the project. I just want to express my appreciation to staff, frankly, because I know this was a different process than we've normally followed, and I think the fact that you've taken such attention to detail and following the principles of the advisory planning or advisory design panel helps a lot when we come to these things. So thank you very much for the amount of and detail of work undertaken to allow this to things to move forward. I know there's always an owner sitting behind the scenes waiting for the project to get built, so it's nice to not be holding things up unnecessarily. Next up on the agenda, we have development variance permit application for 336 Newport Avenue. And again, if anybody from the public wishes to call in on this item, this is a good time to do so. You can call in at 250-588-3311. 598-3311, and we'll make that call again for you, but 336 Newport Avenue. And with that, I will invite the applicant to come in. Welcome. We'll introduce you in just a moment, but first I'm just going to ask Ms. Jensen, our Manager of Planning, to do a quick overview of this application.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this development variance permit application proposes to vary sections of the zoning bylaw in order to undertake some renovations to the home, including replacing the front stairs, replacing the front stairs, adding 2 new dormers, and replacing an existing dormer. The proposed work is not taller than the existing building, but because of its legal nonconforming status, variances would be required to undertake the work. Similarly, the new front stairs reduce the amount of encroachment currently in the front yard, but still require variance for their siting. So proposed variances would be to the front lot line setback and for the building for the roof, building, and occupiable heights for the home. So council considered this application on March 16th, advised staff to move forward with notification. That went out at the end of June, to which we have received 3 submissions, which are attached to the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. We have the applicant here. I'll get you to introduce yourself if there's any questions of you. Otherwise, we're just going to go through this procedurally. So I'm going to go to council at this time. Are there any questions of staff or the applicant at this time? I have Councillor Ney and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Through you, Mayor, to staff, on the notification to neighbors, the lots are very large around there, and I was just wondering, do you know how many neighbors were notified? Because it's usually, what is it, 100 meters? And if you could just clarify that, please.
Ms. Jensen.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. The notification as set out in the Land Use Procedures Bylaw is 50 meters. So the required notification is 50 meters. In this particular instance, there was a bit of a glitch in the notification system using the old mapping system. So the notification that went out was actually for a 100-meter radius.
So do you know how many properties that captured?
So there were 29 properties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, just a quick question. This looks really familiar to me. Did this not come to us before? That we had something? Oh, you're saying yes. You're saying maybe no. I don't know. Maybe we can get some clarification.
Sure, go ahead. I'm going to go to Ms. Jensen because I think I got that at the beginning that it came to us on March 16th, but we never completed it. Is that correct?
That's right. Council considered it at that time, and that's where you gave direction to send it out for notification.
Thank you.
Just for my clarification, it's just been sitting in limbo since that time? No changes have happened to the application? Okay, thank you. Councillor Green, since the applicant's here, why don't you just introduce yourself as well?
Russ Collins.
It's Zebra Design, just for those watching at home. Okay, thank you. Councillor Green.
Yes, and I do remember this one because I think we were very pleased that the house was going to be retained. Often some houses of this age group are not retained, so I remember feeling very good about that, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any any questions of Councillor Zelka or Councillor Appleton?
Councillor Zelka has a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, I presume to staff. Just want to confirm, is this a situation in terms of an area in the attic that's currently not being used for living space that's being converted into living space, which is why we're increasing the occupiable height?
I'll go to Mr. Buffett. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, there was a building permit that was issued previously. I'm blanking on the date, but it was potentially in the 80s. It was a while ago. And it did show access to the top story beyond that of just an attic. So the top story has been occupied historically for a number of years with a building permit. There was a dormer expansion that did not have a building permit, and the applicant is here partially to rectify that. And that also happened several years ago. But the stairway access to the attic, giving it occupiable height sort of status, was in place with the building permit.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that history, and I'm very much in favor of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Appleton, any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Green.
Would you like a motion?
Absolutely, I always like motions.
I will move the staff.
Oh, sorry, I have to go to...
Do you want to hear from the people who are
Yes. Absolutely, sorry, before I get to the motion. And I just want to make another call for anybody watching at home that they can call in at 250-598-3311. And, but there is a delay, so I always like leaving a bit of time. And is there, there's members here? Okay. Ms. Deal, would you also turn on the microphone? Thank you.
My name is T.A. Barber. We live at 416 Newport. And I guess I just have two or three questions. One is that this home is going to be huge. It's not in keeping with the neighborhood really at all, because there's not many four-story homes around, which is what this seems to be becoming. So I'm curious as to what the current square footage of the house is and what it is going to be when this is all finished.
Thank you. I'll get an answer to that question here. I would just want to point out, just procedurally here, just so you understand too, when we're considering variances on the house, it's the floor area, the actual size of the house is not actually not being varied in this case. So the overall floor area allowed on this lot is not being varied. So the house is within that maximum. But I think asking the question of what's changing is a legitimate and reasonable one. So, Mr. Buffett.
Thank you. The floor area ratio when complete is going to be 0.373. And so the gross floor area total would be 427.51 square meters or 4,601 square feet. I don't have the numbers for what it is exactly right now, but it is below the maximum permitted. And since it's below the maximum permitted, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, that is not a varied element, and the floor area as presented could be approved at this level just via building permit with no special consideration.
Just so I think I want to make one more clarification, because I've been by that site quite a lot. I think it's being lifted up right now for foundation work, but the height of the house is actually going to be returned back to its original height. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. The overall height has to go back to where it is right now.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Barber.
And the other, I guess it's a curiosity thing because I'm quite an amateur at this. The variance percentages just seem monstrous. I mean, up to 60%. And so then the question might be, if you're going to vary them 60%, why would you have numbers there to begin with?
The why question is a difficult one for staff to answer. Is there which item in particular you're talking to?
Okay, maximum occupiable height. The required or permitted is 15 feet. The requested is 25 feet. That's a 60% increase. It's actually 2/3.
Okay. Mr. Buffett, you can answer the question if you wish to. I mean, I think we do not have to approve this. The consideration here is always if there's changes made. And so the height in this case is not changing. It's the existing height of the building as it was built in whatever year it was built. And so that's the consideration that we would always consider this under. Is the current bylaws have certain limitations, okay. But do we enforce that, or do we allow the historical sizing of the house to stand? Is essentially what's in front of us.
Thank you.
Mr. Barber, do you have any comments on the variances being asked? Are you opposed or in favor? We usually ask that question of people.
Well, we think it's a shame to have a house that size when none of the others are. And we're a bit concerned about what it's going to be used for.
Okay.
Well, more than a bit concerned.
All right. Thank you.
But you'll look after it.
We will. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here in the attending in person? Ms. Hopkins, is there any other people called in on this item?
Your worship, no calls have been received.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ney, you wish to comment?
Yeah, so I just follow up through you, Mayor, to staff just one more time, if I may, Mr. Buffett. You spoke to, this is an RS2, isn't it? Zoning, I think it was, but.
Correct.
So you pointed out to us that the square footage has not yet been maxed out on the house, and you weren't able to give specific details, but let's say they started from scratch again. Can you give us, I don't want to put you on the spot, but could you provide a little bit more detail, just because of the question Mr. Barber asked? I'd just like to get really clear about, if we're giving these variances to make these changes. If somebody took the whole thing down, how much larger of a house could we expect to have?
Sure. So in terms of actual, I'm just going to use my calculator here. But in terms of the actual floor area ratio that they could go to, and I'm going to talk while I do it, their current lot area is 1,147 square meters, and they can go up to 0.4 of that, so 40%. So they could go up to 458 square meters, where they're currently proposing to go to 427. So as mentioned, they're at, when complete this project, if this project proceeds and they do complete it, they would be at 0.373. And so they're a few percentage points below the maximum that could be built to.
Could we just try this square feet? That would be
sorry.
about, no, just if you could translate that. What's
Sure-
that?
sure
Almost
thing.
another.
It's about 300
Eight-
square feet, 400 square feet.
Okay.
4939.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
And just so I'm clear, is the applicant here tonight, or are they not? Oh, sorry, Russ is here, of course, yes. Sorry. I was like, wait a second, I thought we had a... Mr. Collins, welcome back. I don't know that we better just stand there for a second, because if you don't sit down, you don't have to wipe everything down again. So we'll just give us a second. Not that we don't trust you, but let's just keep this safe. So are there any other questions? And again, I'll just ask Ms. Hopkins, any further calls in at this time?
Your worship, there are no callers.
Okay, so I seem to be out of questions, out of callers. So why don't we take a motion at this time, and then we can talk to that.
I'll make the staff recommendation motion to approve this application.
Second.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this application? I'm going to just go to Councillor Appleton and Councillor Zelka. Any further comments?
No, thank you.
Councillor Zelka?
Other than appreciating that the 1912 home is being saved and upgraded, I appreciated that. No further comments.
Okay, so with that then, looking around, no other comments, I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Okay, so we have all in favor, none opposed. That carries. The project gets to go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'm now going to move on to another variance permit application at 2326 Lincoln Road. I will again, if anybody watching at home is interested in commenting on 2326 Lincoln Road, they are welcome to do so. Our staff are inviting the applicant in from the parking lot if they actually it's literally the parking lot, not just a parking lot by vernacular. And welcome. So we're just welcoming the applicant into the room at this time. So welcome, sir. You can have a seat, and we may or may not have questions for you. We'll just see. But at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Jensen to give an overview of 2326 Lincoln Road. And again, a call out. Anybody wishing to comment or have questions from home, the number is 250-598-3311. Ms. Jensen, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This home is located on the lower portion of Lincoln Road, where it arcs around towards Heron Street. The existing home includes an attached garage on the lower level of the home, but as a smaller garage with limited space, the applicant is proposing to construct a detached two-car garage on the southwest portion of the site, so that would be facing the south portion of Lincoln Road. To mitigate impacts to a mature Douglas fir tree located at the rear of the property, the applicant is requesting a variance for the siting of the detached garage. This would involve a variance to 0.45 meters from the exterior side lot line. Staff have reviewed the site and the adjacent neighborhood for any impacts. The proposed siting places the garage outside of the critical root zone of that Douglas fir, so there's minimal impact. It will also improve the current parking layout, and engineering staff have confirmed that there would be no concerns for that reorientation and for the extent of that variance. So, for example, no impact to sight lines. One driveway access would be closed, the existing access, to accommodate the new access leading to the detached garage. So again, there would only be one driveway access on Lincoln Road for this property. Staff do not anticipate any significant issues with the siting of the garage and are seeking council direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. Are there any questions of the applicant or, okay, I have Councillor Green and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, and through you to the applicant. Thanks for coming. Just a quick question. Will the garage face the street? I see that it's a double garage in design. Will it actually face the street, or is it behind the house? I'm sorry, I had trouble telling from the drawing.
So before you answer the question, if I can just get you to give your name and municipality residence and then answer the question. And you have to push the button to answer. Thank you.
And thank you.
My name is Richard Moser, and I live in Oak Bay. And to answer your question, the garage would face the street there, where it loops around.
Thank you, Mr. Moser.
Then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to the applicant. I know you've done significant renovations on the house. I walk that route all the time, so thank you for that. I'm just wondering, the proposed location of the garage, I understand the rationale for moving it closer to the street property line. The garage is being located very close to the rear of the property too, and with that large tree there, I'm just wondering if any consideration was given, or if the distancing that is required between the house and garage would permit moving the building forward.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. To the applicant, Mr. Moser.
Just to specify, you mean moving the house, so increasing the distance from that rear lot line? Yeah. So the rationale there was to minimize that, to pretty much minimize the, I guess, let's call it dead space, which could theoretically be a kind of a hazard, we feel, to our kids. That, well, we have our first one expected in September, so we just wanted to really minimize and, well, maximize the usable space of the yard, and that there required us to move the garage as close as we could to the lot lines.
Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Just a second question, has there been any comment about that from the neighbor at the rear of the property?
Mr. Moser, this process at this point would be, we would approve it in principle if we desired, and that would go for notification to the neighbor. So, but Mr. Moser, have you had conversations with that neighbor at this point?
I have indeed, and they're okay with it as long as we kind of soften it as much as we can, which we've done with the cedars as best possible.
Thank you. And just for my clarification, are there any variances to the rear lot line on this? It's just the side lot line, is that correct?
Yeah, there's no variance to the rear lot line. The exterior side lot line is the only varied element.
Okay, thank you very much. Not seeing any other questions at this table. Councillor Appleton or Zelka, are there any questions from either of you?
A question from Councillor Zelka?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I do note that we have that wonderful pathway that connects that corner of Lincoln Road with the Willows Beach area, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
And I just wanted to ask staff if there was any concern with the number of pedestrians going through that area, whether this would make sightlines better or worse, or just wanted to know whether staff had considered the fact that a fair amount of public goes through that wonderful cut through.
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this was referred to engineering for a full review of what was being proposed, particularly, again, given that we were proposing to vary down to 1 foot from the property line. It's a fairly large, wide boulevard through there, so keeping that in consideration, as well as that we're now moving more parking onto the actual site as compared to being out in the boulevard, there were no concerns at all, whether it was sight lines or parking or what have you. This is actually bettering the situation.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Chair. I would tend to definitely agree with staff on that. I appreciate the fact that you've reviewed it.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Appleton, did you have any questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. Not so much a question as a comment, just broadly very much in support of taking this approach to retain that mature tree. So, yeah, very much in favor of the approach taken here.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions at this table. I am going to just make a call again to the public. If anybody wishes to talk about this with us, you can do so now at 250-598-3311. And Ms. Hopkins, are there any calls in at this point on this land use application?
Your Worship, no calls have been received.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the formal process here is that the notification goes out. We would normally receive those in writings, but procedurally we do open it up to the public for any comments at this point. We'll give it a few seconds here for the public if there is anybody calling in to take those. Not seeing any, then I think what we'll do is we can take a motion at this point and have a debate on that motion.
I'm happy to make the motion that council approve construction of an accessory building at 2326 Lincoln Road, subject to issuance of the development variance permit DVP 00097, and that notification be given of council's consideration of that development application.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any other discussion on this motion? Councillor Green?
Just a really quick comment through you to Mr. Moser. I really appreciate, one, that you've taken into account your rear neighbor and you're sensitive to his or her needs, and the fact that you are retaining the trees. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I don't see any other comments. I will call the question then. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. So that passes. Since we have some people here who do this all the time, you're not one of those. So, Mr. Moser, what happens here is that with this approval, essentially approves that we see it has merit. At this point, the notification process goes out. It goes out to all neighbors within 50 meters of your home. We'd be required to wait at least 2 weeks for that, but just given the quirkiness of our timelines right now, it might be a little longer than that. But at that point, we would come back to this table, just like the last application. I guess you weren't in here for that, but we take, if there's any written submissions, we consider those, and then based on the cumulative input, we will then make a final decision of whether to approve or not. So that's the process. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you. All right, have a good day. Enjoy the weather. I haven't lost my place. I believe we're on item number 7 now, which is down to bylaws. So this changes our procedure a little bit in that we are actually, because we've already done first, second, and third reading of these 3 bylaws, that we are just in adoption process. So we will, if we can maybe just have 2 people in this room, the same 2 people move in second, and then we can adoption, then we can have a discussion at that point.
So you want us to move adoption?
Yes, so item number 7.
I'll
Just
move
read it.
adoption of bylaw number 4758, delegation of authority of administrative functions bylaw amendment, bylaw 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Appleton or Zelka, any comments? I'll go in order. Councillor Appleton?
None for me.
Okay.
None for me.
Okay, thank you. So back to this table, looking around, not seeing any. I will then call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Thank you. On to item number 8.
I'll move that council consider adoption of the tree protection bylaw amendment bylaw 2020 number 4759.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none at this table, Councillor Appleton or Zelka, any discussion? Not hearing any.
Thank you.
Okay, then we have a motion on the table. Last chance for people in terms of comments, questions. Councillor Green.
Sorry, I didn't mean to wait so long. Just one for clarification. I believe there was amendment around the fine process during the COVID that there were, or the security deposit. I'm trying to remember now. I'm sorry. It was only a week ago, but every day blends into the other. When COVID is over, and at this point we don't know when that might be, we then would revert back to the normal security amounts on trees. And, you know, is there any sort of timeline, or is that impossible to determine at this point? Thank you.
Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff is considering those on a case-by-case basis as well during this time of pandemic, because the resolution specifically linked the event to pandemic. We consider that to be a sunset clause on that decision.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing any other discussion? Not seeing anything here. I'm going to just hold a moment of silence in case Councillor Zelka or Appleton want to chime in with a last-minute comment. Hearing none, I will then call the question. All those in favor? And Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor of adoption.
And because not everybody raised their hand, I have to ask, any opposed? None opposed, so that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And item number 9.
I'll move that the adoption of water rate bylaw amendment bylaw number 2, 2020, number 4762.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? I'll leave again a moment of silence here for Councillor Appleton or Zelka to make a comment or question. I'm not seeing any, so I'll bring it back to this table. No further comments, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor of adoption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We have just one motion to go.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
Yes.
All right. That calls our meeting adjourned at 6:32 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody, for getting through our first land use bylaw or land use meeting in quite a long time. So much appreciate the care and attention taken. Have a good evening.